also go live on my Instagram. Live. Let's put this here. Okay. There we go. All right. Hi. So I'm going live on my YouTube and also on my Instagram so that I can kind of bounce back and forth. And I feel like with Instagram, I'm able to better, like I could see, for some reason, sometimes the chat on YouTube doesn't work. So I'll just do both. And today we're talking about the eclipses. We are currently now in eclipse season. It's October, and we have 2 eclipses coming up in 1 month. So it's a really, really intense month. We also have Venus moved into Virgo. And that's what's ruling the eclipses because they're both in Venus signs, Libra and Taurus. And Venus is currently currently moving through Virgo right now. So that energy. And then also we have Mars moving into its home sign, Scorpio, which I feel like that energy is already becoming more prominent, especially as we're shifting, as the eclipses are getting closer as well. So yeah, gonna talk about those things, and I just want to make sure I just want to double check my dates so I have the right dates for everybody. So let me see the current planets and I pulled up my can you not? Dang it, now it's messing up my lives. That's really annoying. Decline. Sorry, sister, if you're in the lives. Don't call my phone right now. Okay, Mercury's moving into Scorpio on the 21st. Sorry, I lied. Mars enters Scorpio on the 11th, right before today. Okay, I'm off. I'm a little behind. That makes a lot of sense though. Okay. So first of all, if you don't know what an eclipse is, an eclipse happens when the sun, moon, and earth align in an exact instance to where one is blocking the other from our point of view. So if we're the earth, where we are here, this is earth, right? And then you have the moon that goes around us. So the moon maybe stops here, right? And then we also go around the sun. So then the sun would be, this pin. We're going around the sun, and then the moon is also going around us. So at some point they'll line up exactly, whereas the moon is blocking the sun's view, or the sun is blocking or we're blocking the opposite way around, where we're in the space of the sun, and the moon and the sun are exactly opposite, or they're literally on the same side, and we're and the moon is blocking the sun's view from us, or our view of the moon is being blocked because we're in the way between the sun and the moon, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna say that one more time. So in a solar eclipse, the moon's view is being obstructed because we are basically the moon is basically coming between us and the sun. And then from our point of view, it creates a blockage from us seeing the sun. It's like directly aligned with the sun from our point of view. And then it blocks us from being able to have sunlight for a moment of time. And then if it's a lunar eclipse, it means that we are obstructing the light from the sun to hit the moon because we're in between, if that makes sense. So that opposition is happening. And then you see the moon is fully the moon gets eclipsed for a moment of time, and that's what happens. That's the what's happening. And so what that translates to for us in, I guess, like spiritual terms or astrological terms or on a more energetic way, is that that eclipse is almost like a course correct, or like is a moment of time that allows things to shift in the universe and shift us on our paths or push us in different directions, or kind of correct for lack of better wording. So which is why after eclipse happen, especially if it's happening in a specific point in your chart, or it's hitting your sun or your moon or a very prominent planet in your chart, you have these kind of big shifts that happen over time from that moment, or a little bit before that moment, things like that. This Instagram view is giving me double chin, but whatever. So yeah, that's what happens. And what is being activated is the nodes, and the nodes are these points of time where the eclipses are kind of heightened and active. And so we are having this month our last eclipse in Taurus. From the past year and a half, we had Scorpio Taurus eclipses on that axis. And now we're shifting into Aquarius and Libra axis. And so our solar eclipse is going to be in Libra. If you remember, earlier this year, we had an eclipse in Aries, and that was the start of this shift. And we had our last eclipse in Taurus in Scorpio earlier this year as well. And I think either the end of April, or I think it was the end of April. That was the last Scorpio eclipse, and then the Aries eclipse that we had after that. So yeah, and now we're shifting. And so if one of the things I usually tell people, or that's smart to do, or just like look into, if you are curious, like what might be coming up for you, or what's the theme, is looking back. We had the very first Taurus eclipse of this cycle back in November 2021. So around middle of November, I think the exact date is the 18th of November. And it was at the end of Taurus. And now we're having the last one, the final Taurus eclipse, happening at 5 degrees Taurus this year. So if you kind of look back, see what has been themes for the last couple of eclipses that you've experienced, you can kind of go back in time, look through like old calendar stuff, or what you were doing around that time, old pictures, see where you were, what spaces you were in, or even old notes. People take notes. It's really good to look at where you were and what was coming up for you during those times, especially to see what might be kind of finishing out or rounding out or coming to a close for this eclipse that's going to be at the end of this month in Taurus. Now for the Libra eclipse, it's the first one in Libra. So it's a new moon eclipse. So we'll have a new moon in Libra, and then you'll have the solar eclipse where the sun will be eclipsed, and it'll go out of our view for a moment of time. And what it's going to do is prompt new energy, right? It's starting a new cycle of something being the Libra area of your life being reviewed and kind of purged or shifted, transformed, changed, things like that. Think of things about the moon, right? The moon is always changing. It shifts into a new sign every month. If you notice, Cancer people who are ruled by the moon are considered moody, right? They're always changing moods or feeling different about things, right? So thinking about kind of things changing in a more sped up timeline, in a sense. And then also thinking about too, with Libra, this axis, the Aries Libra axis, is all about self and other. So relation and self-preservation, and themes of like love and war, right? If you think about Libra people, they're all about relationships and harmony and beauty. And when we think about Mars is all about fight and strategy and war and active energy, right? Libra is more of a thinker, or more of idealist, things like that. So also thinking about the elements that they are, um, thinking of Libra being an air sign, which a lot of that has to do with communication, our brains, our mind, right? Those kinds of things. And Aries being a fire sign, which is so much more physical, like fire rises, those kinds of things, motivating and all that type of stuff. And so um, those are be the themes going into this next round. And it's also continuing from the Scorpio Taurus because both are ruled by Mars and Venus, right? Scorpio is a Mars planet, is a Mars sign, and Taurus is a Venus sign, while Libra is the air of Venus, and Aries is the fire of Mars, right? So you have Aries is fire Mars, Scorpio is water Mars, and then you have Taurus, which is Earth Libra, Earth Venus, sorry, and then Libra, which is air Venus, right? So those are the things and how we're shifting into that. So we're going from a very more grounded and settled place of eclipses into and more fixed energy as well, right? Like the Scorpio Taurus axis is fixed. It's like things being really kind of set in their ways and um, on a kind of consistency and things like that, right? If you think about Taurus people, they're very like steady people. Taurus can be very consistent in what they feel and their emotions. That's why people will say like, oh, Scorpios. I said Taurus, I meant Scorpios. Scorpios hold grudges and da 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 da, right? They are fixed in that water and that emotion and things like that. And Taurus is fixed in the earth and can sometimes be considered like stuck in the mud or stuff like that, right? And so we're shifting from that kind of more stable, steady place into a space of like, okay, more of spirituality, spirit and logic and thinking and those kinds of things. That balance of like logic versus what your spirit says, right? Because Aries is more spirit, right? If you think about Aries people, they're courageous. They act without thinking. They're like, just go for it, right? That Aries energy is like that. Whereas Libra, the other side of that, is very much like, let's weigh the options. What's fair, right? Like, what about everybody else? Aries is like, no, what do I need? What do I want? And I'm going to do what I want. So moving more into that space with everything. And it's very obvious with all the stuff that's coming up in the world right now that we're shifting into a very, very intense space. And that balance of like, what's fair, what's right, what's law, those things being challenged, activism, and I think of activism and like fight and all that stuff and fighting for what's right. That is a very Aries Libra axis. And so seeing all that stuff really coming to the forefront, right? It's not like it's never been there before, but it's becoming more of the forefront of what's happening very obviously in the world, right? I think during the Scorpio Taurus, it was a lot about like money, like food stuff was coming up, right? What is Taurus all about? Food and what we put into ourselves and in abundance, whereas like that other side of Scorpio can be scarcity and like those kinds of things. So resources, all that stuff was very the Scorpio Taurus axis. Now we're moving to a space of like basic like rights and human connection and what does that mean? Oh, I don't know. Things like how we connect with each other, how the harmony of our interactions, our world, the beauty of our world, but also the fight of our world, the strife of our world, the kind of more wars and things like that, for example. So that is kind of the gist of the eclipses that are happening, the overall kind of view. But to go more in depth, starting with like the Libra eclipse, the solar eclipse, a solar eclipse happens when there's a new moon, which means that the sun and the moon align exactly up with each other from our point of view. And then we can't see the sun's light because the moon is blocking it, right? The moon is in front of the sun, so it obscures the sun's view. But what's going to happen is that eclipse is also happening within that. And so when the eclipse happens, I think it's going to be happening. I want to say for our like Pacific time is like 10 something in the morning, if I'm not mistaken. But sometimes people get caught up on like, oh, that exact day. Like sometimes if there is like specific things happening in your specific chart, there might be something that happens that specific day or time that shifts in you or something changes that day. But for most people, if it's not on a specific point, like your first house, fourth house, this is just my opinion, if it's not hitting a like very specific point of like your rising, your descendant, your fourth house, your IC or MC, or hitting one of your personal planets, sun, moon, Mercury, maybe and even like Mars, Venus, something very close to you, in your, not even close to you because it all is you, but like something more prominent or just more of the day to day and kind of the closer planets to our world, then it might be something that is more of an over time thing or background noise for you. And it won't come into your forefront until a later, eclipse happens or transit happens in your chart. So, what I mean by that is when you look at your chart, you have a full circle of 12 signs, 12 houses, and you have planets all throughout that. So, for example, when people say, oh, I'm a Libra rising, that means their first house starts at Libra and then the rest is like Scorpio, blah, 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 all the way around that chart. So, if someone is a Libra rising and they're having an eclipse on that rising, they're going to feel that more prominently than somebody that's a, I don't know, Pisces rising. They might feel it more potently and it happening directly in a more directive way that is shifting something right here, right now, and in their kind of embodiment and how they are moving through the world. It affects all of us, but it's going to affect us in different ways based on your chart. So you could be like, sometimes people will be like, well, I'm an Aries and I didn't feel nothing or this or that. And it's like, well, did you pay attention? Because sometimes people don't actually pay attention, and so you're just thinking that life is just happening to you or things are just happening around you, and then you kind of just it's a fleeting thought or it's a fleeting moment, and now you're over it and you're thinking about the next thing that's happening or the next thing that's coming up in your life or whatever stresses you have in your life, things like that. So a lot of it too is if you're not paying attention to these things, you won't notice them. So yeah. But for the Libra eclipse, it's the solar eclipse and it's a new moon, which means this is bringing in new energy. It's a time of new moons are typically times of planting new seeds, setting new intentions, things like that. And what I tell people during eclipses, just my opinion, is to just chill. It's more so about you just getting finding ways to settle yourself internally versus feeling like, and I feel like with this energy it's going to be very restless because Libra and Aries are very heightened signs. They're air and fire. So if you think about air, it's always everywhere, right? If you think about air sign people, they're always connecting and having to move around and do things. And fire is similar in that way, where it's always having to elevate and do something, or, you have a lot of energy. So I feel like this energy is going to be very restless for a lot of people. Like if you're struggling with sleeping right now, or just having really intense dreams, things like that, the energy is very restless right now. And so the biggest thing that I would tell people to do during this first eclipse is to find ways to get grounded, right? And like calm your nervous system, calm down. I wouldn't be trying to get anything super important accomplished or like put just like stuff that's going to take a lot of your energy at the forefront. Obviously, if you have to, then do what you need to do for yourself, but just know that the energy is already, the universe is doing its own shit, and so you can't stop that, and you're not gonna you can't exactly fight against what is meant to be shifting and changing and happening in your life. And so allowing those things to just kind of be, and seeing where you are and seeing how you can just stay grounded and be open and more receptive versus feeling like you have to be very active and get ahead of this or that. The way to get ahead of it this time around is just to like really take a step back and sink in and like slow down. Especially too because that's what the time is calling for. There is literally we just moved into fall, and so the weather's starting to be up and down. We're starting to get like more colder temperatures. The leaves are falling. Things are starting to die off, and so that literally tells me, and in my body, we're starting to have longer nights, things like that. That lets you know, okay, it's time to more calm down, right? Just naturally, you might feel a little more tired lately, things like that. So finding stuff that helps you stay grounded, stay present in the moments, right? Like if you're spending too much time thinking about what's going to happen, what you need to do, you're like kind of losing a lot of your time right here, right now, and with the people that you care about and love, because you're always somewhere else or trying to figure out, be 10 steps ahead. And sometimes it doesn't call for you to be that or do that. And Libra, like I said, is all about relation, harmony. It's the air of Venus. So it's social, it's connective, it wants to be everywhere. It's about aesthetic, it's about beautifying things, it's about um, fairness and harmony. And also it's the other side of Aries. It's the first opposition that happens in astrology, so it's all about opposition as well. And being able to recognize opposition but not always see it as a problem, right? I think that Libra teaches us that opposition can also be complementary, and it's not always a battle, and that you can see many sides of things, and it doesn't have to be one way or the other. It can be both. So I think some of that will be a lot to do with this eclipse and this season of eclipses, or this round of eclipses that we'll be having for the next year and a half, is balancing in our relationships, being able to communicate better in our relationships, having healthier relationships, not just seeing things for what they look like, but also showing up in action for people, not just like saying all the right things, right? Showing up in like, if Libra is telling you what you want to hear, like telling you things, that Aries side of it is showing up and acting that out, right? Is being is embodying and being in action in what you agree upon, right? If Libra is your agreements, that Aries side of it is the action in those agreements, the action towards those agreements, that kind of stuff. And yeah, so I think that's some of the big parts. You can look to where Libra is in your chart. So, for example, if you are let's just say a Pisces rising, that means Libra is going to be your eighth house. Let me see, Pisces, Virgo, yeah, eighth house. So it's going to have some deeper um, themes coming up around maybe intimacy in your life. Maybe some debt stuff comes up. People owe you or you owe people, or things like that. It might have to do with um, yeah, ways that you've not expressed your desires or needs with another party or person, or things like that type of stuff. Maybe ways that you just kind of compromised in your more deeper connections, or those types of things. It might bring up that type of stuff. um yeah, and it's gonna have the same themes but in different parts of your chart in your life. So, yeah. And then later in the month, we have the lunar eclipse, which is the last lunar eclipse in Taurus. And like I said, it is very wise to go back in time to get a better understanding of what this eclipse, this final Taurus eclipse, this kind of ending cycle is about. So the very first one that happened for this round of Scorpio Taurus eclipses, the first Taurus one was on November 18th, 2021. So go back in your notes, look back at your calendar. What events were happening? What were you doing around that time? What was going on? Like if you just kind of look at different pictures and stuff, you'll start to feel like notice what comes up. What headspace were you in at that time? And then that will give you clues to what this last one might be rounding out and closing out for you, because what our lunar eclipses happen under full moons, and full moons are when we're between the sun and the moon. So then we block the sun's light. I mean, we for the eclipse, the sun, the earth is going to align so perfectly that it's going to block the sun's light for a moment in time, making the moon kind of disappear basically, or not be seen. But with a full moon, just in general, it's when the sun and moon are opposite, and the moon is reflecting all of the sun's light down on us. And so everything's illuminated. Things are coming to a close. It's a time of like revisiting your journey, paying attention to what got you here, what worked, what didn't work, those kinds of things. It's a reflection period. It's also a celebration period. Being showing gratitude and things like that for what got you to where you are now, or noticing what may have been something that you could have avoided or did differently, things like that, but also just honoring the journey. That type of stuff I feel like is very full moon themed. And so this full moon is closing out that whole chapter of, it's the last one of the Scorpio Taurus axis. So it's closing out that whole chapter of eclipses that had happened over the last year and a half, right? What was going on in 2021, late November, mid to late November, and what's been happening, what's been a running theme from then to now. Taurus is all about sustainability. It's about, on a more obvious level, it's about food and things that we put into ourselves. It's about pleasure in our senses and feeling things through what we experience through our senses, the physical piece of Venus. So it's physical pleasures, right? Those kinds of things. It also talks about if you know Taurus people, they're very like slow and steady. They can be kind of less not wanting to shift or change. And so these eclipses have also woken up a lot of like shifts or changes in Taurus, I think, energy. If you know people with heavy Taurus placements or Taurus suns, things like that, this energy has probably forced them to kind of shift in ways that they maybe didn't want to at some point, being kind of stuck, like I said, like stuck in the mud and not really wanting to push or move, being kind of like more bullheaded, And so, yeah, having this eclipse, I think for the lunar eclipse is a good time to, with Taurus, be, same thing, stay grounded, but also maybe even more so take it a bit further, being present in nature or doing things with like physical stuff, like plants, plant medicine, things like that, herbs, or being in, touching, literally like touching grass, shit like that. Using your crystals if you are into crystals or things like that. That is a form of kind of, I feel like, Taurus energy that can be channeled in a really nice way. So yeah, and the Taurus area of your chart is going to experience this kind of ending and this closing out. So for example, if you are if you are, I'm trying to think. Let's see, Taurus, if Taurus is in your ninth house, house would be eighth house would be, I can't think. Aries, seventh house would be Pisces. So then you'd be a Virgo rising. So Virgo, Pisces, Aries, Taurus. Yeah. So maybe your rising is Virgo. So then that would put Taurus in your ninth house, right? So it might be a closing out of a certain belief you held on to for a really long time, or closing out of maybe like you're finishing up school, like your college or things like that, or some sort of learning that you've been doing, or some sort of journey that you've been on is kind of coming to a close, that type of stuff. Maybe you have maybe it'll be closing out so that you're adopting some new way of thinking about something or beliefs or those types of things. Maybe it's a closing out of, maybe you might be traveling or starting a new journey in some other way, that type of stuff. So yeah. Um yeah. And these eclipses are being dominated by the Venus in Virgo right now. And so another thing that comes up with that is, if you think about Venus in Virgo, Venus um doesn't necessarily feel comfortable in Virgo. Virgo is very detail oriented and can be finicky and critical, and kind of also very servicing. And Venus is like, I want to just have love and blah blah blah, and I don't really care about all the details. Like, I just want to love and things be harmonious, right? And Virgo's like, but wait, this little detail, something's off. So sometimes Venus can struggle here, and so it's not very comfortable in Virgo. And having that ruling over these eclipses, it just can bring out that kind of uncomfortableness of it all, even though um it just can bring out that uncomfortableness and that finickiness and that pickiness, and that, like, oh, it's not perfect, like this image, like everything needs to be perfect and things need to be right. And but it also can bring a lot of discernment for people, I think. What's the good thing about having the Venus being in Virgo now is discernment is a big thing that Virgo has, a beautiful trait, right? Like, discerning, it can pull out the impurities of things. It can easily spot off or not quite right. It's meticulous and very um, d- just detail oriented and observant. So that also is really nice, I feel like, for these eclipses, to allow us to be like, okay, let me just see what's really happening, take a step back versus just thinking that we need to jump into action and be doing all this shit. It's like Venus, that Virgo energy will kind of allow us to be more of like, let me settle and think about this, right? Because Virgo is ruled by Mercury. It's an Earth Mercury sign, right? It's the physical and the more settled version of Mercury, when Mercury moves through Virgo. And so having that, it's like we'll use our minds a little bit more. We might be in our head a little bit too much at times, but we'll be able to have more of a discernment about ourselves and ability to digest things, I feel like, a little bit easier. Especially when it comes to our relationships, being able to digest and see what's not working, what is working, what is kind of taking away and not really benefiting, or not even benefiting but helping us, and what can be hindering us, and things like that. Yeah. And then on the 11th, so literally a couple days before um, the first eclipse, Mars is going to move into Scorpio. And this energy, I feel like Mars has been ready to shift into Scorpio. Um, Mars in Libra is not a total, right? Libra is all about love. Libra is ruled by Venus. The opposition of Venus is Mars. And so having Mars in an opposite, almost kind of like an opposite kind of energy, I think Mars is kind of like, let me out, I'm ready to let loose. And I think that we see that with people's impatience and all of these, like, Mars and Scorpio is so much more calculated, right? And so much more driven to get what it wants in a very almost like, um if you think about Scorpios, it can be very calculated in kind of like this quiet way. And so think about Mars moving into Scorpio, seeing what's happening right now and going on, just in general. A lot of like, I feel like Scorpio, some people can confuse Scorpio with being a fire sign because it's ruled by Mars. It's like Scorpio is like steam, right? It's like water that turns into that hot steam that can burn you, right? And so that's the kind of energy that Mars and Scorpio brings. Another thing that you can think about is go back to, the last time, the times that you've experienced Mars and Scorpio. You can look this stuff up. You could just look up Mars and Scorpio transits, right? So I think the last time we had Mars and Scorpio was Mars. You have like Mars returns every 2 years. So I think it was about like, was it 2019? Maybe something like that. Um, and thinking about what was going on for you then, or what Scorpio placements do you have, right? If you have specific Scorpio placements, you're going to feel this Mars energy, this desire to be more active and go after things, which is also kind of confusing with the eclipses, because the eclipse energy is like erratic all over the place, and you really don't want to be doing too much. But the Mars moving into Scorpio, moving into its home sign, is going to be like, okay, let's go, right? Like let's get on it. Let's move. I don't have time. I don't want to wait no more. I don't want to be, I'm coming out of Libra, where I was like indecisive and didn't really know which way to go or which way to move. And now I'm ready. Like, I feel Scorpio energy is much more decisive and ready to shift and go and move and do and conquer and all those kinds of things. Um, so yeah, feeling that energy as well. Yeah, I will kind of stay on just for a little bit longer. If there's questions, I'm going to kind of jump back and forth. But that's mostly all that I have to really say about the eclipses. Obviously, if you want a more detailed, something that's personalized to you, you can always book readings with me through my website, or you can also just like look up. There's so much stuff that you can look into now. You can Google Mars and Scorpio, or like, first of all, if you don't have your chart, you need to go get a chart, get your chart. Go on astro.com or astro-seek.com and put in your birth time, birth date and year, and the city that you were born, the city and area that you were born in, and it'll give you a whole map of what's going on. And then most of the time, websites will have different descriptions of each placement for you. So if you don't have that stuff, you really need to like look at your birth chart so you can have a better understanding or see where it's happening in your chart. And then you're able to ask more questions and things like that. So yeah, I will kind of linger around for a little bit longer. If there is questions, but if there's no questions, then that is all. I hope that people are able to kind of pay attention to what's going on and really tune into what's happening. And kind of, it's nice to take notes and notice what you've been feeling leading up, because with eclipses too, something that I forgot to mention is that they start taking effect. It can be months ahead and months after. The time and the place of your birth is very important, because they literally create the map, right? The time and your birthplace are what create your rising, because the moment that you came into this world sets up your houses. So your first house or your rising is literally, like, for example, I'll show you. I'll just draw a little ugly chart. Don't laugh at me, guys. It's a very ugly circle, but this is my little 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I need one more. Maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, one more. Damn, I can't. Am I slow? What the hell? Hold on. Okay, this is very ugly, but so can y'all see this? So this point right here, these are your 4 like embodied points. This is your rising. So when you say, like for Isabel, for example, when you say I'm a Leo rising, that means that when you came into the world, when you pushed through your mom's womb and entered this realm, this is that moment right here. And then that moment is going to set up everything else that's happening in your chart and in your life. You guys see that? This is that moment, this rising sign, this rising degree, this rising point. So it is very important to have your time. And a lot of people, I noticed that some people don't have their times. Like I've noticed that people in like New York don't put the time on the birth charts. I don't know if you guys have to go to the hospital, the records, and get like a more detailed. I think they sometimes will have more where you can go to the records and get the more detailed report of your birth. Because it's not, for some people it's not on their birth charts. I mean their birth charts, their birth certificates. But I know in California most of us have our stuff, but I think like more when you get East Coast, they don't put the birth time on the birth charts. The location is very important as well because it's going to set up where the sun was rising and setting in that time of place, right? Because what is astrology is the relationship between the planets. So how you're rising is even like determined is based on where the sun was rising or setting that day, right? So if you was way in Baghdad, but you was born in Richmond, nigga, that's way off because the sun was setting over there probably when it was rising on this side. You know what I'm saying? So it's gonna throw, and then that's gonna throw your whole chart off because that location at that time ain't right. So it's important to have those things. Yes. Hey, Breezy. Also, hi everybody. I see people have been joining and I just don't be missing it. Hi Isabel. Hi. I think it's Sai, but I don't want to say it wrong. The plant-based. Hi. Yeah. Any other questions? Thoughts, feelings? How y'all been feeling with the eclipse happening? I'm gonna stop my YouTube one and I'll just tune into just the Instagram one. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end my YouTube stream and then I'll share that. And if people want to jump in